Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a review of this Helmut Walcha, the complete archive recordings. And boy, is this an iconic set of discs if you're into organ music and a little bit of harpsichord too. So, for those of you who don't know who Helmut Walcha was, and I think most of us probably know something about him, he was an organist who really was the iconic interpreter of Bach for most of the mid-20th century. He recorded the complete Bach organ music. Now, let's stop for a minute. The complete Bach organ music is several things, because there's a lot of disagreement about all the works that were attributed to Bach that he may or may not have written. But Walcha did the canonic Bach organ music, not some of the more controversial stuff, and he recorded it all twice. He inaugurated Archive music, Deutsche Grammophone's early music series, in the 1940s with his first Bach cycle, and then he redid all of it in stereo. So there are two complete Bach cycles, and both of them are here. Now, one of the things that made Walcha unique in his time was his preference for using Baroque organs or small organs or organs similar to those which Bach would have known. That was a big deal in those days when organs were still the larger romantic models and people did whatever they wanted with them. He was not concerned with what we might call period style as we understand that today. He did not ornament freely. He was a very sort of strict, nice, sober, serious. Yeah, my colleague and friend Jed Disler referred to him as sort of the Otto Klemperer of the organ world. And that's a good analogy because his interpretations were extremely persuasive, but they were also very sober. They created a picture of Bach as an extremely serious guy, which of course he often was, but he could be playful, he could be light. I'm not sure really how organ music ever is very light and playful, to be honest with you. It tends to be serious and sober sounding. Walcha's real originality and uniqueness comes, I think, from the fact that he always performed contrapuntal music with exceptional clarity of voicing. You always could hear the different layers of texture. Part of the reason for that comes from the way he learned the music. He was blind, and from the age of about 16, from a smallpox vaccine, actually. He had a bad reaction and it was losing his sight anyway, and this sort of finished it off. So he was blind, and he learned contrapuntal music by learning the parts individually and then putting them all together. He had an extraordinary memory, as somebody in his position must have, and he could improvise with the best of them. And so his contrapuntal playing had a wonderful clarity and sort of freedom of voicing. Now, his voicing was a special thing because organists are completely at the mercy of their instruments. They really, really are. There's not a lot you can do with organ music to personalize the sound. But what you can do is make interesting or individual choices. So his voicing was always selected, again, for contrapuntal clarity. He was also quite a virtuoso. It's in the toccatas and fugues. The toccatas are marvelous. Today, some people would say he's probably a little bit stodgy by modern standards of playing everything as fast as possible and whatnot. But he really there were no gaps in his technique, and his pedal work, his feet were phenomenal. Just phenomenal. In fact, his personal approach to voicing and timbre, that's stop selection on the organ. You pick the knobs that activate the pipes that make the sounds that you want them to make. His voicing was so individual that he refused to permit his stop selection to be published. And of course, you would adapt your selection to whatever organ you happened to be playing. And so the organs that he used, which not only were very well suited to the performance of Baroque music, but they also quite often had unique sound qualities which he would exploit. And so the only other person who knew really knew what kind of stop preferences he had, what kind of registrations he chose for this music, was his stopmeister. Now, the stopmeister was a person who would run around while he was playing, and as he needed to change stops, would pull out or push in the correct ones, because after all, he was blind and he couldn't always see where they were or what he was doing. He had no trouble with the keyboard or the pedal board. And his stopmeister, we don't actually know his last name, but his first name was Igor, and here he is. That's Igor. He may look vaguely familiar. I mean, I'm sure it's simply a coincidence, but this was Helmut Walcha's stopmeister. But Igor is no longer with us, as Walcha is no longer with us, and so the secret of his unique sound has died with Mr. Walcha and with Igor. Well, okay, be that as it may. This box contains the 2 complete Bach organ music cycles in really fine sound. The stereo recordings sound marvelous, and the monos are really not bad. They're really not bad for their period. I really would love to be able to play you a couple examples, but I don't have permission from Universal, but I have my own solution on how to do it. So I'm going to play you 2 examples of Bach's Little Fugue in G minor, just to give you a sense sonically of the difference between the mono and the stereo versions. So here is the Little Fugue in G minor in the mono recording. Okay, that's the mono one. It's perfectly listenable as it is, but here is the same piece in stereo. Okay, so there you go. That's a wonderful simulacrum of the difference between the two. And if Universal would prefer that their artists be represented in perhaps a more dignified and serious way, then give me damn permission to play the samples. It's that simple. Otherwise, I shall merely continue on my merry way. So really the question is, what do you get in here in addition? In addition to the 2 Bach things, the 2 Bach organ music cycles, you get, you get the Well-Tempered Clavier on the harpsichord. Now that's a little bit problematic because Walcha was not as good a harpsichordist as he was an organist. And I think the reason has to do with really the difference between the 2 instruments. You know, the organ, he was able to differentiate his sound and create interest through contrapuntal clarity and selection of registration. On the harpsichord, even with one that had lots of stops and bells and whistles and things, it wasn't strictly speaking a period type instrument. You have a very different means of creating expressive nuance. You know, although neither instrument is terribly touch sensitive, the harpsichord is somewhat touch sensitive. It is. And the organ is totally insensitive. And the organ is fabulous with legato and with counterpoint. The harpsichord is terrible with legato. It's very good with staccato, but it doesn't sustain tones very much. And so Walcha's way of playing was very well suited to the organ, but on the harpsichord it does sound a bit stodgy. He really does, because you would inflect more by rhythm and accent to the extent you can, and flexibility of pulse. These were not the things that were his specialty. And so I find his Well-Tempered Clavier, however well executed it is, to be rather stuffy and somewhat dull. But he did do, let's see, the sonatas for violin and harpsichord. These were with Henrik Schering, which is like, what's not to like? he's accompanying, sharing is terrific, and they're beautiful performances. And you also get organ masters before Bach. This is 3 discs, originally I think it was 4 discs, of music by all kinds of people you probably haven't heard of. Let me see. Well, I mean, Pachelbel we know, right? Pachelbel was one of them. But let me get the booklet out. L booklet. Here's the booklet. And I'll tell you who these guys are. They're really actually, some of it's quite lovely, and there's quite a bit of it. Here we are. Here they are. You ready? Let's see. Vincent Lubeck, Dietrich Buxtehude. We know who he was. And in fact, one of the organs featured in this set is Buxtehude's organ in Lubeck, which was really, Bach went to visit there and spent lots of time there. And there's that fabulous story about Buxtehude. You know, everybody wanted Buxtehude's job, but in order to get the job, you had to marry his daughter, Euphrodisia Buxtehude. Actually, I just wish her name had been that. It would have been so much more fun. Her real name was Anna, and she was getting old and a little bit long in the tooth, rumor has it. And Handel went there, and Matheson went there, and Bach went there, and everyone went to Lubeck, found out what the deal was, and fled Lubeck. And the one person who did not flee Lubeck was Johann Schieferdecker. And Johann Schieferdecker married Anna Buxtehude, who became Anna Buxtehude Schieferdecker. And from that point on, Lubeck ceased to be a musical venue of Northern German notice, because Schieferdecker was an absolute nobody, but he was willing to marry Anna Buxtehude. I want to write a play called Buxtehude's Daughter, about the whole story from Anna Buxtehude's perspective. I mean, it could be so much fun. I got to figure out how to do it, or a screenplay or something like that. You heard it here first, guys. Don't take my idea and try and capitalize on it. Okay, so there's Samuel Scheidt, there's Nicholas Bruns, there's Sweelinck, who's marvelous. We talked about him, and Franz Tunder, and Georg Böhm, who was a real predecessor of Bach. And let's see, Johann Pachelbel, and that's who it is. So lots and lots of cranky old German composers cranking out cranky old German organ music. And in fact, one of the things that sort of keeps you away from this music, I have to say this, you know, I have a certain fascination with Bach's organ music, because you have this sense of it as this sort of, Phantom of the Opera, toccata and fugue in D minor, that creaky gothic horror music. But it really is its own world. And it's also the only body of organ music that anybody really cares about. I mean, there's other great organ music, but you can sort of sum up the world of organ music in, there's Bach, then there's the Mendelssohn organ sonatas, then you get Franck, Widor, Vierne, and Guillemot, the French organ school, and Messiaen, culminating Messiaen, and that's it. Nobody else matters. Now, of course, organists would disagree. Organists probably, there's Max Reger. Liszt wrote a couple pieces. There was, there are others out there. But from a practical point of view, people actually get played and we care about them, other than organists that break out of the organ world. Bach is about it. And that's because he's Bach. So the music has its ongoing fascination. But you do have to get away from that image of the music as sort of this sort of creaky gothic, And Walcha was part of that image. He really was. He was blind. He was a blind, creaky German organist. That's what people think, which really isn't fair. Here he is. There he is, sitting at the organ. And, if you look very carefully, well, you can't see in the back, behind him would be, of course, Igor, the Stoppmeister, who would be pulling out the other stops. You can see the stops. They're here on the side. See, like right there, the knob things. Those are the stops. And then you have the organs themselves, which they have some photos back here of some of these organs. There's one of them. It's sort of like this encrustation of pipes crawling up the wall of a creepy old Baroque church, and the buildings themselves are rather scary looking. Let me wonder if I could find one of them here. I don't know. But I mean, when you look at this, I mean, there's Helmut Walcha on his harpsichord, as you can see, looking extremely dignified and noble and German, and so there's an image of this music, and it's a rather fusty image, and it's not fair to label Walcha with that fusty image, even though his image was pretty fusty. I mean, it was, let's not kid ourselves, but the music itself is extraordinary and wonderful and brilliant. And I've already done a video on sort of a beginner's guide to Bach's organ music with Richter performances on Deutsche Grammophon. So, but there are so many complete sets of the Bach organ works and, other German stuff, all because of Bach. I mean, he saved organ music, really, for the rest of us. And these performances have held up since the 1940s. They really have. The differences between them, as you heard yourself, my fabulous example, are not great. It's just sonics, basically, and the choice of organs. And so the key to enjoying this music is finding an instrument that you can tolerate. Because if it's not orally fatiguing, that's not orally, not orally fatiguing, then the performances will probably come off well if the organist knows what he's doing. And God knows Walcha knew what he was doing. He really knew what he was doing. And so for fans of German organ music or Bach fans, this is a valuable set. Not for the Well-Tempered Clavier, certainly for the organ works, and there's also a fabulous Art of Fugue in here, and also because you get the origins of the Bach style on 3 handy discs instead of 400 discs of this stuff, because there's just tons and tons of it. It's a beautiful set. It's not too expensive, and I think that, if you're it's for hardcore collectors, let's not kid ourselves, and for people who can tolerate organ music, which is also a subset of classical music collectors. But it's worth trying. It's worth giving a listen to, and perhaps you should. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.